And welcome back to Square Off. Cindy McCain had her maverick moment this past week. The widow of the 2008 Republican presidential nominee, John McCain, is endorsing the 2020 Democratic presidential nominee, Joe Biden. I'll ask our next guest, Michael Steele, MSNBC commentator, former head of the Republican National Committee, now a senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, whether that endorsement will make a difference. Michael Steele, welcome to Sunday Square Off.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Well, what do you think about that? Here in Arizona, 90% of Arizona Republican voters are pretty firmly behind President Trump. Cindy McCain believes she can peel off some of them. What kind of impact do you think her endorsement will make here and with Republicans or independents around the country?
Oh, I think it's an important moment in the life of this campaign, particularly given the importance of Arizona and the role that it will play in selecting the next president of the United States, and also changing the dynamics of the U.S. Senate. So the fact that Cindy McCain put her imprimatur on this race by supporting Biden says a lot. It says a lot about the gravity of this race for the nation. It says a lot about her commitment in the wake of her husband's passing to public service, and making sure that good leaders emerge to fulfill the requirements of public service. And of course, with respect to the independent and center-right, center-left voters that you mentioned, I think it can help shape for them, particularly those who are still kind of parsing through and trying to figure out, all right, do I really want to vote for Joe or do I really want to vote for Biden? Having this kind of thrust from a person like Cindy, I think it's important. People weigh these things surprisingly enough. They may not tip the scales, but they do have an impact, and they do reshape at the edges, at least for some voters, how they look at these races.
In your work for the Lincoln Project, who have you found to be the most persuadable voters? Because the polls show many people have really made up their mind. A surprisingly large number of people have made up their mind.
Yeah, that is the unique data point about this election. Typically, at this point, you're looking at around 7 to 10% of the electorate is still kind of on the fence, trying to figure out, what they're going to have for breakfast, let alone who they're going to vote for president. But now a lot of people have made up their mind. That number's down to around, latest numbers I saw were around 3% of the American population, voting population, has not made up its mind. So our target at the Lincoln Project are those voters for sure, but to also reinforce for those voters who have that you got to go vote. It's one thing to make up your mind, to say, yeah, I like Joe or I like Trump. It's a whole other thing to actually get up, get that ballot and vote, and to participate in the process. So the emphasis now for both campaigns and for our PAC at the Lincoln Project is to make sure that voters get out and exercise the franchise and actually vote. And obviously our goal is to turn out a stronger base of support for Joe Biden. But look, this is a full-on game at this point, and you can't hedge your bet at any moment. So you have to stay engaged and get that vote out the door. And again, having someone like Cindy McCain's voice in the mix, having voters turn their attention to the work that we're doing at Lincoln Project goes a long, long way. And it also helps to have races that are hot spots like the races in Arizona, that again focuses the attention and attracts voters to the poll.
So the Lincoln Project is dominated by Republicans. One of the leaders is John McCain's former campaign manager. Are you all comfortable with a Joe Biden administration and what that might bring to the country?
Well, as I like to tell people, this election is not about a specific policy. It is about the country. It is about how we collectively pull ourselves up out of the morass we are now in, and move forward. I look forward, and I've said this to a lot of my Democratic colleagues. I say, yeah, you like me now. Let's wait till January 21st, the day after the inauguration, and you start putting out these policies and talking to stuff, then we'll have a different conversation. And that's what the country should be focused on. That's what this should be about. We've become a cult personality around one individual. And you just ask your audience, when you get up, but between the time you get up in the morning and the time you go to bed at night, how many times do you talk about, mention, or reference Donald Trump? And I bet it's more than you talk about, mention, or reference your own spouse or your mama. And that's not what this country should be about. So let's get off of this treadmill that we're on and focus on these big policy issues that have not been addressed over the last 4 or 5 years. The president just recently talked about, I've got a health care plan. Well, dude, you've been saying that for 3 years now, not to mention what colleagues inside my own party have been saying for the past 8 years of Obama, that they were going to repeal and replace. Now the president's talking about an executive order on health care, but he's got his administration suing to repeal Obamacare, which has pre-existing conditions already built into it. So this sort of, mealy-mouthed sort of back and forth on these big policy issues speaks to the fact that we got to have this debate. And I'd rather have it with a president who's serious about the discussion than one who has no clue and no idea and no plan. Now, and we just can't keep going into those moments without some direction.
There's an irony here for Republicans, even those who oppose President Trump. One of his legacies appears to be right now, as we sit here, a conservative court that could be in place, Supreme Court that could be in place for a generation. The likely overturning of the Affordable Care Act by next June, and possibly the overturning of Roe versus Wade. That's been a political trinity for mainstream Republicans. You must be happy with that, no?
Well, look, again, those things are good in and of themselves. I know the justices that Mr. Trump has already appointed. I like them. I'm not as familiar with the women he's considering and planning to announce, for the court, and that's fine. I get that. I've never had a dispute about that. But it matters who sits behind that resolute desk. It's not just that you give me a tax cut or you give me a Supreme Court nominee that I like. There's got to be more to the office of the presidency than that. Republicans have always talked about the value of the individuals who hold the office, that we raise our children to have high regard for who sits in that Oval Office. And we say to our children, one day you can grow up to be like that individual, to be president. So if this is what it looks like, I'm not telling my kids that's on the plate for them, because I don't want them to be like that. And then you have to, if you don't want them to be like that, then you have to ask yourself, well, why? I had a friend of mine who was haranguing me about not supporting Trump. And I said, well, are you, telling your kids that's how you want them to grow up to be? Because remember, there's more to this job than just doing the job, which I would argue is not done very well. But there's more to it than just signing an executive order and having flashy moments. You've got to stand for something. You've got to believe in something. And first and foremost, those two things are the United States of America and the American people. And so I put a lot more weight on it than just the niceties of a tax cut or Supreme Court nomination. And yeah, we can check those boxes. But then when I look behind me and I look around me, what have we wrought? And I think that's a big question for a lot of Americans this November.
And the question right now is a president who won't commit to leaving office, who's raising all kinds of questions about the election. How much confidence do you have in your fellow Republicans in Congress that they would put an end to whatever the president might try to do after Election Day?
Zippo, because I think the standard is the Lindsey Graham standard, hold me to the videotape, right? Play it back. And then the moment comes and like, well, psych, I wasn't serious. And there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the unfortunate space we find ourselves in. And the fact that the president would say what he said about the vote this November, not just that, he thinks vote by mail is fraudulent, even though he himself has voted by mail twice this year, right? Once in the primary and once for the general election in November. But then to go on and put out this narrative that somehow participating in this is a fraudulent act. And inviting Americans to vote twice. Hello, that's a federal offense. As president, you should know that. But the fact that you would tell people to do it speaks to the point I was making just now about who sits in that Oval Office behind that resolute desk. And as for the rest of my friends and former colleagues in the Republican Party, with whom I served as national chairman, shame on you for your silence and lack of commitment to the American people when the president says stuff like this. And when he gets up and he says to the country, well, I may not accept the results of the election, or, why don't we just do away with those ballots? So that way they won't have to worry about a peaceful transition because I'll still be president. Not only is that selfish, it's stupid, because that's not how this country works. That's not who we are. And quite frankly, I'm tired of it. And I'm tired of having these discussions instead of what we were talking about before, bigger, more important discussions about the quality of life in this country, civil rights in this country, criminal justice, the economy, our relationships around the world, etc.
All right. Michael Steele, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.